Find your iHeartRadio everywhere. There are hundreds of ways to experience iHeartRadio at home and on the go, beyond the iPhone and Android app and at iHeartRadio.com. Here's another way to connect to iHeartRadio. It's TV, radio, room, or bedroom. iHeartRadio is available on every Roku TV, Roku Smart Soundbar speaker, or Roku players. And with Roku's Full Search, you can easily access your favorite artists or radio stations. Your iHeartRadio music, radio stations, and podcasts now on your big screen TV with Roku. Check it out for free now. iHeartRadio.
He's a Texas legend, fame broadcaster, the voice of the Texas Longhorns, and your host of the Craig Way Show. Here he is now.
I wish I was all those things. I am not all those things. I am not the estimable, legendary Craig Way, the voice of the Longhorns, the voice, as they like to call him, on the east side of things. But my man Craig Way is out. So is Cameron. I appreciate those guys for giving me the time and the opportunity to guest host the Craig Way Show for you. So I appreciate them, and I appreciate you guys for joining us as well. We got a lot to get into on the show. All right, we'll talk plenty of Texas football. You guys know how I do it. I'm always talking Texas football any opportunity I get. So we'll stay behind the burnt orange curtain, talk about the latest declarations. Longhorns who have made their declaration to go to the NFL draft, forego the rest of their eligibility on the 40 acres. Cam Williams being one of the latest to enter the NFL draft from the 40 acres. We got a lot of other guys that we'll talk about too, but it is a long list. So the 2025 roster for the Longhorns will look very, very different than it looked in 2024. So we'll talk about it. We'll get into it. We'll dive deep into some Texas football conversation, but also we got lots of NFL discussion to get into. We'll talk about what we learned from the first round of the NFL playoffs. We'll get into it. We'll talk about the Texans. We'll talk about the Cowboys and their head coaching vacancy. As a matter of fact, we'll start there. That's the biggest story probably right now in sports. Jerry Jones knows how to steal a headline and even stole headlines, I think, from the NFL playoffs. The first round was not all that entertaining, but Jerry Jones and the latest coaching search for Jerry Jones and the Cowboys is a very entertaining one. All right. All the names that have come up are it hits close to home too for the Longhorns. All right. Because Steve Sarkisian's name has come up a couple of times. I don't know how much validity there is to it, but Sark's name has come up. That's a good thing for Longhorn fans. I'll tell you there's some good and some bad news to that Sark's name. And Schefter said that it's not just for the Cowboys vacancy, that his name has come up for several vacancies potentially just because of his NFL background. We'll talk about it. I'll tell you why that's a good and a bad thing for Longhorn fans. We'll get into that too. Also, we'll dive into some Texans conversation. I want to talk about that, but all of the other NFL playoff games from this past weekend, we'll get into it and talk about it a little bit. And even the one, of course, from Monday night, we'll get into that too. The Rams look fantastic. The Vikings, not so much, but I'm sure my man Craig Way is excited because he's a Rams fan and his Rams are advancing in the NFL playoffs. So we'll get into it. You can hit me up via Twitter. I'm at Rod Babers in the Twitterverse. Ronald behind the scenes, twisting and tweaking the dials. So I appreciate him as well. All right, so let's get into it. Let's get right to it. Let's start with the Dallas Cowboys, because I think that is the big topic of conversation. We'll get to Longhorn football. I tell you, I promise you that, we'll get into it here in just a second. As a matter of fact, this Cowboys vacancy relates to Longhorn football. We'll be able to just bridge the gap really easily. So Jerry Jones decided to, well, they said it was a mutual parting of ways. Number one, which I don't agree with. That's not, I don't believe that. I don't believe in mutual breakups. I'm sure they exist. I'm sure there are exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, there are no mutual breakups. Somebody instigated the breakup. Somebody started it, right? If breaking up is like indeed knocking over a Coke machine, somebody had to start, pushing it over. Somebody had to start, get the momentum going. And I think ultimately Jerry Jones wanted to move on. I mean, he allowed his coach to be a lame duck coach, right, for the entire season. I mean, that right there tells you, well, I'm not very interested if you allow your coach to be a lame duck coach. I get it. You want to see what his team did this season, but everything went off the rails with the injury to Dak, and we've obviously went over that ad nauseum. So I don't think Jerry Jones loved Mike McCarthy. I think he liked Mike McCarthy, but he didn't love him. He didn't want to commit to him. And so I think Jerry Jones was the one who really started this thing. And the truth is, Mike McCarthy, I think he's going to end up getting a head coaching job. A lot of people say that the Bears, he's got, I believe, an interview with the Bears tomorrow. He's also been a hot name for that Saints opening. I think Mike McCarthy will end up getting a head coaching job because Mike McCarthy's he's a good coach. And he was a great coach, but he is a good coach. Proved that with the Dallas Cowboys. But the Dallas Cowboys, you got to be a certain kind of coach too. All right. You gotta, they're trying to thread the needle here because Jerry Jones, he wants a great coach. He wants a great elite football coach, but he also wants one that doesn't want too much control and one that is willing to allow Jerry Jones to put out mixed messages to the media about the team, what's going on with the team, because it's his team, but he may not necessarily be on the same page with the head coach in a disjointed, unorthodox chain of command. And most ball coaches, like really good ball coaches, they want, as Bill Parcells once said, all right, if I'm going to cook the meal, you got to allow me to buy the groceries. They want some control behind the scenes. And Jerry Jones controls it all, right? Controls the message, and behind the scenes, he's ultimately making the final decisions. And you got to find a coach that's fine with that situation. And most of the coaches who are fine with that situation aren't necessarily great football coaches. The few that Jerry has hired that have been considered elite football coaches, your Jimmy Johnsons, your Bill Parcells, you're talking about all-time great Hall of Fame caliber guys, and even Mike McCarthy, who won a Super Bowl, they've decided at one point, no, I'm good. I'm okay. This is way more than I bargained for. Even though Jimmy Johnson won Super Bowls, even though Bill Parcells had success and got them really, really close, and then Mike McCarthy had, a minimal amount of success with the Cowboys, they decided, because I think those are the most reputable, respectable coaches that Jerry Jones has had since he's been there. And they've all decided this one a mutual parting of ways, but we know how the Bill Parcells thing worked out. All right. We know how Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones, we know those two egos clashed, couldn't work it out. So the question is, when he hires somebody here, who are we going to get? We're going to get somebody who, and the rest of the coaches, I'm not knocking them, I'm not saying that they're bad football coaches, but they're not Super Bowl caliber coaches, right? They're not coaches that are going to win you a Super Bowl. And the other coaches had already, they either proved it with the Cowboys or they had proven it before they got to the Cowboys. And then ultimately all ended up being so at odds with Jerry Jones that either a mutual parting of ways or, deuces. I got to get out of here. I got to go. I can't handle it. So that begs the question with this next hire, are you going to get a real ball coach, somebody who's got Super Bowl potential, or are you going to get somebody who just works well with Jerry Jones? And Jerry Jones, he knows how to win a Super Bowl. He knows the guy that got to hire. He does. It just doesn't always mean it's going to work out. Now, the Mike McCarthy thing is interesting. I've said before, and we'll get into this later on the show, you had reached your 5 years with Mike McCarthy. I'm a big 5-year rule in the league. You guys know this. Big 5-year rule in the NFL. The NFL is built around it. The 5-year rule. That basically, if you got a coach and you got a quarterback, and they've been together for 5 years or more, and they haven't shown you that they are capable of winning a Super Bowl, it's time to move on. It's probably trying, not either from the quarterback or from the head coach, it's time to make a significant, and I know that sounds crazy, but the stat does not lie. You guys know I'm big on the numbers. History don't lie. The 5-year rule. No team has ever won its first Super Bowl by starting the same quarterback for the same coach for more than 5 seasons. Never. Not in the Super Bowl era. Never happened. The NFL has they've built the entire infrastructure of the league, the salary cap, the way the draft is structured, everything is around, you got a window. And your window is about 5 years. I do think Jerry Jones had a sense of urgency about that. And I think that may have been one of the big reasons why, because I predicted actually that Mike McCarthy would stay. I thought that he would. That was like, no, he's not going to find anything better. He knows he and Mike McCarthy, at least they work well enough together because he knows that he's ultimately butted heads with great coaches. He decided to move on. I think the 5-year rule, he was thinking, I'm not going to win a Super Bowl with him. Not going to win the Super Bowl with him. Hey, try to find somebody who will. But the Cowboys, who are the number one TV star on the number one TV show in America, they do operate by a different set of rules. So they're actually a better TV show than they are a football team, which is why they're the most valuable sports franchise on the planet because they know how to market themselves. We'll come back. We'll talk about the Cowboys, the coaching potential candidates to fill that vacancy, Sark being one of them. We'll also talk about the Texas football team and how it's going to look in 2025 with all the departures, all that and more coming back on the Craig Way Show right here on AM 1300. So. Okay, Ronald, let's go with some of the departures for the Longhorns that have announced they're either going to the NFL, and obviously some guys are just done with their eligibility. But some of the guys who are underclassmen who had more eligibility, who decide they're going. So those guys included, but the list continues to grow, and man, it's getting longer and longer. So now, and I just saw this Cam Williams, who I thought may have been one of the ones the Longhorns could have potentially, tried to keep, or maybe he would have decided to stay to increase his draft stock or improve his draft stock. He was already being projected as a first round pick potentially early on the season. I think since a lot of that talk has cooled, if you will, I think now his draft stock is probably around him being a second round pick. But either way, second round pick, he doesn't care. Second round pick is good enough. So Cam Williams is the latest Longhorn who's decided that he's declaring for the NFL draft, underclassmen. But more guys. I mean, the list is crazy here. Of course, Jake Majors and Gunnar Helm, guys who had Vernon Broughton, guys who had exhausted their eligibility too. They were deciding to go, but David Benda, who says that this is his time. I think these guys actually were done with their eligibility. But Matthew Golden has decided that he's going. Mo Blackwell is another player that's leaving. Isaiah Bond, another player that decided that he's headed to the NFL. So your receiving core, I mean, you're not retaining much considering you're going to be losing Isaiah Bond, losing Matthew Golden from that receiving core too. So it's right now it's a good thing. It's a great thing because the Longhorns have a ton of talent. And, right now, a lot of that talent is, is draft eligible and is draftable talent. But it's going to completely kind of change the entire landscape of the 2025 roster. I think the positions that are going to be hit the hardest, by the departures, like I said, and we'll go over them kind of, player by player, because some of these happened a couple of days ago. But I think it's wide receiver and O-line now, no doubt. Considering Jake Majors started more games than any other player in Texas football history. He's gone. You're going to lose Kelvin Banks. Arguably the greatest offensive lineman in Texas football history. You can make that case. Won multiple national awards and started since he was a true freshman. He's gone. And now Cam Williams, very high-end talent. He's going to be going too. So you're losing almost your entire offensive line. Like you're losing basically the entire offensive line. That's a concern, and you're losing a lot of your receiving core. Brian Wingo is going to be fantastic coming back, like the DeAndre Morris coming back to you. But you don't return a ton of proven talent in your wide receiving core. Sark's always done a good job of bringing in wide receiver talent via the transfer portal. So you'll have that opportunity too. But those two positions definitely hit the hardest. There's no doubt about it from the latest departures. And like I said, we'll go over them in more detail a little bit later on in the show and talk about each position and each player's projections in the NFL draft. But those are just some of the latest. I'm sure there will be more. We talked about, Jaden Blue's another one of those guys that you're going to miss, considering 14 total touchdowns from Jaden Blue, over 1,000 all-purpose yards for Jaden Blue. And, that's just a weapon that you're going to miss on offense and prove to be your most effective weapon versus Ohio State. And so we'll talk about that too coming up. But let's get back to the Cowboys and their vacancy and the names that have been associated with the Cowboys job opening. It's interesting because the names that you hear are the most salacious and the most they're interesting. They're entertaining. I don't know how substantive they are. Deion Sanders is the top name that you keep hearing, which makes perfect sense. If the Cowboys are indeed a TV show, that is the move you make. That's it. Like it really, if the Cowboys are indeed what we all thought they have always been, which is more of a TV show than a football team, then this Deion Sanders move is going to prove it. I'm not saying it ain't going to work. I love Deion Sanders. I wore number 21 at Texas because of Deion Sanders. That's how much I loved him. I wore number 2. Coach Tim Brewster, who recruited me, he said, "Oh man, you want number 21 because that's what he is in the league." I wore number 2. That's how much I love Deion. Wanted to be like Deion my entire career. Of course. I mean, what corner didn't? Want to be like Prime Time. But that wasn't going to happen. But Prime Time, nobody sold the brand that they personified better than Prime Time. That's what Jerry Jones respected about him, and that's what he respected about Jerry Jones, the greatest sports marketing mind and arguably one of the greatest sports promoters in the history of sports is Jerry Jones, whether y'all like it or not. He's part of the formula that makes them the number 1 TV star on the number 1 TV show because he's always a villain. Villains create conflict. Conflict creates storylines. The Cowboys always got a storyline. So here's Adam Schefter when he was on Undisputed, I believe, and he was asked about the prospect of Deion Sanders being the Cowboys' next head coach. Here's what Adam Schefter, the insider, had to say.
Jerry Jones is so great that if Jerry Jones calls him, he's always going to listen. And that's what happened. Now, Deion also has been talking to Colorado and said that, made it very clear, he loves it there. Loves it there. He loves Jerry Jones. And honestly, that's a great spot to be in if you're Deion Sanders because you're going to have 2 winning hands here. Question of which one you want to play, if you can even play both of them. Now, I don't know that it will get to that point with Dallas. It certainly can. I think back to a conversation that I had about, I don't know, 16, 17, 18 months ago where I was talking to an NFL general manager. He said, "I got a prediction for you. Mark it down right now. The next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys is going to be Deion Sanders." And I was like, "Really? Okay." And I always remember that. And lo and behold, Jerry checked in with Deion yesterday. And they'll continue talking, but I think it's Deion last night. So what's next? I don't know. So I think everything's really up in the air. Maybe that means talks intensify. Maybe it means they don't. I don't think he knows right now. I think it's all in the beginning stages. And by the way, I think that's probably also true for the Dallas Cowboys. Like, they think, okay, well, we like Deion, but we also like whatever else is. And there may be other people. And as you go on in the process, you become more and more impressed with certain people and less impressed with others. And your interest in hiring certain people shifts. And so I don't know where it's going to go. Deion Sanders doesn't know where it's going to go. Jerry doesn't know where it's going to go. But it's certainly interesting that he's interested in Deion, that they've spoken, and that there's definitely something left. Here we go. Return.
All right. It seems like Deion's kind of been offered the job. We don't know this for sure, but it sounds like Deion has kind of been offered the job. Adam Schefter tweeted out, this is from Deion, "To hear from Jerry Jones is truly delightful and it's intriguing. I love Jerry and believe in Jerry. After you hang up and process it and think about it, it's intriguing. But I love Boulder and everything there is about our team, the coaches, our student body, and the community." So we shall see. Like I said, Jerry loves the drama, and it is great drama now. And like I said, it's very compelling. That hire would be the most entertaining hire in sports in some time. Deion in college is a phenomenon. He's a kind of generational phenomenon. You've never had a Hall of Fame player coach go back to college and coach. Hall of Fame players coach in the NFL all the time. That's where they go. They're Hall of Fame players. They got that credibility. They usually don't go to go back to the college level and coach. So Deion's just a superstar in college. Get the best players, different animal in the NFL. He doesn't have the same cachet. And I wonder if, that matters to Dion. That it's a different beast. He knows that, by the way. But that's intriguing. The names: Deion Sanders, Jason Witten's another one, Bill Belichick, Ben Johnson, Sark, John Gruden, Kellen Moore, Lincoln Riley, Doug Peterson, Pete Carroll. If you've heard any more, throw them out there to me. All right, we come back. We'll talk Texas football. When we come back, we'll talk about how that 2025 roster is going to look and all the departures that we've heard about so far. All that more right here. Come back on the Craig Way Show right here on the Zone. host the show, so I really appreciate him giving me the opportunity. So Craig and Cameron will be back next week. Actually, I'm getting a chance to host for the rest of the week, so I appreciate you guys joining us. Let's talk some Texas football. Let's go get into the go behind the burnt orange curtain and get into some Texas football discussion. All right, so it's tough these days because of the COVID years and all the other years of eligibility to track all the guys like we used to. Be like, oh man, this guy's a senior and junior, and know how many years of eligibility guys have left. So sometimes it's tough. So I'm just gonna go through all the guys who are departing, period. Ones with eligibility and guys who have exhausted eligibility. And honestly, now everybody puts out a statement. It used to be guys put out a statement if they were just declaring early for the NFL draft and they were underclassmen. Now everybody puts out a statement saying, I'm going to the NFL draft. It's like, well, how you know you're getting drafted? I mean, what you mean you going to the NFL draft? What? I mean, some guys, I get it. Like, oh yeah, you gonna get drafted. But now everybody puts out like a draft logo on their announcement, like, you get drafted. So I'm glad they're confident. I'm glad everybody's confident that they get drafted, and they're just making their announcement. And they always put like a little 2025 draft little symbol on the announcement. I'm like, all right, good for y'all. You know what I mean? You gotta think positive. All right. But here you go. So Quinn, he was obviously one of the first that came before the game versus Ohio State. And we'll talk about Quinn's legacy, all that kind of stuff. But Quinn, Jaden Blue's on that list. Jaden Blue's really interesting too. And some people are thinking, oh man, why did Jaden Blue decide to leave? He had, more, he had another year and maybe he could have come back and, been, I don't know, built on what he had already done, which is over 1,000 all-purpose yards and 14 touchdowns. He wasn't going to do that. And running back is a weird position. It's not a premium position in the NFL. And it has been devalued and undervalued for the most part. I think it is making a comeback with guys like Saquon Barkley playing well at a later age and Derrick Henry. For the most part, that is the case. You don't get a lot of running backs drafted early in the NFL draft, and that affects the rest of the draft as it relates to that position. So, I get it. This is probably 14 touchdowns. He ain't going to top that at Texas. He's a good player. But he's not going to top that at Texas. And once you believe you hit your ceiling, in college, it's probably time for you to go, especially at a position like running back that's not a premium position. Will he get drafted? There'll be maybe a quarter of the league that would salivate over having a guy like Jaden Blue on their roster. Kansas City Chiefs being one of them, Miami Dolphins being one of them, scheme-specific teams. And I think that's what they're banking on. That we've showcased him on big stages, scored 2 touchdowns versus Ohio State on the same, wheel route, rail concept. They believe, hey, in the right system, this guy can be weaponized. Even Sark weaponized him in that way. And I think that's what they're banking on, with the value of the running back position being what it is. Vernon Broughton is out too, but I believe he's one of those guys that had exhausted eligibility. Andrew Makuba, going to miss Makuba. The 512 crew. We have not heard totally because Janae Barron, he's gone because he's got no more eligibility, but and the Thorpe Award winner as the best DB in college football. We'll talk about that too. I'm going to give you my, at one point, I don't know if I'll do it on this show this week, but at one point I'm going to have my DBU rankings. I used to rank all the greatest DBs in DBU history. All right, including myself at Texas. And I didn't rank myself very high because, trust me, that's how many great DBs there have been. I don't even think I cracked the top 20. That's how many great DBs. And I'm going to get bumped again because now Janae Barron is on there. He's a damn good player. But Andrew Makuba, I didn't think he was going to be as physical as he turned out to be. I remember questioning when I saw him up close in person. I was like, man, he's small. Like he's small. He's a little dude. I was like, I see why he played nickel. Dabo said he played every position in secondary. I was like, yeah, probably more nickel and corner, but his size and stature does not reflect his style of play. That dude is physical. He is a physical player. So I expect Makuba kind of leaving on a high note. Had a really good year. Matthew Golden. We'll get into Matthew Golden because Daniel Jeremiah had a tweet that got Longhorn fans really excited and kind of blew me away too. When I heard Daniel Jeremiah, when I saw Daniel Jeremiah's tweet, we'll get into that. Gavin Holmes is another guy that was surprising to me. I think Gavin Holmes could have come back and competed for the other starting cornerback spot opposite Malik Muhammad. I know Kobe Black's probably got the, right now he probably has the inside track on that spot because he's the only other corner we saw, a good amount of during the season in some critical moments, other than, kind of trash time. But I thought Gavin Holmes played really well. I thought he was one of your better coverage defenders. I know this because when they went up against Ohio State, the best wide receiving core they had faced all year, remember when they would match and they would play basically man on man, and they would want to match up their best corner, Janae Barron, with their best receiver, Jeremiah Smith. And they did that a couple of times in the NASCAR package. They put Gavin Holmes out there, and he was matched up on the number 3 receiver, not Jalen Gilbo. So they believed that he was their third best coverage option. And I'm surprised that he's leaving. Maybe NFL scouts have told him, or he's got some response and feedback that, hey, man, they've seen you on film. They like the film. I like the film. Guy can cover. Like he really did. He improved a lot as a coverage specialist, if you will, this year. Kelvin Banks, of course. I mean, we've talked about him. Greatest offensive lineman in Texas football history. You can make the case. I mean, enough said. Guy's gonna be a top 10 pick. Hayden Connor. I was surprised. I didn't know if he had more eligibility or not. So Hayden Connor's a guy who declared as well. We talked about Jay Blue, Matthew Golden. Another guy, Isaiah Bond. We talked about him earlier. Isaiah Bond has also declared. And that's surprising because his draft stock dropped. He was projected as a first rounder before the season started. He has world-class speed. A lot of people believe he's going to run low 4.3s, maybe even high 4.2s. And initially he looked like he was going to be your leading receiver. He was going to be your top dog in that receiving room. He gets hurt, and then the landscape changes. Everything changes. Matthew Golden steps up in that room, and Isaiah Bond's never the same. Like, we don't even see him really. There are stretches throughout the season where they said he was healthy, and still there was no impact to me on the game, including in the Ohio State game. Mo Blackwell is also done. I believe he exhausted eligibility. Gunnar Helm's got a case to have one of the greatest, if not the greatest, kind of tight end season in Texas football history. It's in the conversation. We can talk about that later on this week, but just get your mind right. Cam Williams, another guy declared for the NFL draft, did not have a great game versus Ohio State. A lot of people thought he was hurt, gave up 2 sacks, I believe 5 pressures in that game as well. And then Delton Gardner is also deciding that he's declaring for the draft. I believe he was exhausted his eligibility, but still, like I said, everybody throws out the draft on their announcement. Whether they're getting drafted or not, doesn't matter. All right, we come back. We'll get into more Longhorn football discussion. We'll talk about what the 2025 roster is going to look like, and talk about some of the departures. And that tweet from Daniel Jeremiah about Matthew Golden says a lot about what his draft stock and what he achieved in the last couple of games for the Longhorns. All that and more right here on the Craig Way Show, right here on the Zone.
It's AppleLeasing.com. Portions of the following program. Here we go. If it's Texas sports, Craig Way. Oh, no. 1300 and so. We're back. It's the Craig Way Show with Hall of Fame broadcaster and voice of the Texas Longhorns, Craig Way.
All right, welcome back to the Craig Way Show. I am a lifetime Longhorn, Rod Babers, sitting in for Craig Way, who is on the road. So I appreciate Craig Way letting me guest host a show for a couple of shows this week. Let's get back to the Longhorn football conversation. I just kind of went through the list of guys who are, either declaring for the NFL draft or guys whose eligibility has been exhausted, so they're heading to the NFL. How many of these guys are actually going to get drafted? Like, in my opinion. And I do think you're in double digits again. Remember last year, you had 11 players drafted. Kelvin Banks, no-brainer, going to be top 10. Cam Williams leaving. He's going to be drafted in the first 40 picks. Maybe a first rounder, maybe not. Janae Barron, I think, should be a first rounder. But I think he's got to be in your top 3 cornerbacks. Usually there are at least 3 cornerbacks drafted in the first round. Just because you win a Thorpe does not mean you're going to be drafted in the first round. There are plenty of Thorpe Award winners drafted outside the first round. But man, it depends on how he tests and how he runs, if he's a first rounder or not. But those guys are going to be drafted in your top 45 picks or so in the NFL draft. Matthew Golden. Now, this is the thing about Matthew Golden. Listen to this Daniel Jeremiah tweet. Told you guys I was this. I love Matthew Golden. I think he's great. I did not expect to hear this from Daniel Jeremiah. He said he tweeted this 3 hours ago, and he's a draft analyst for NFL Network. He said, just finished studying Texas wide receiver Matthew Golden. He could easily be the top wide receiver in this draft class. Yep, that's what I said too. If that is the case, that is mind-blowing. It really is. There's nobody then in college football that increased their draft stock more than Matthew Golden. There's no draft projections, mock drafts. I'm a mock slut. I look at anybody's mock draft. There's no mock draft anywhere and no projection prior to the season, during the season, even within the last 6 weeks, that had Matthew Golden as the top receiver in the draft class. Most people had him as a mid-round pick, maybe, at wide receiver. And wide receiver, by the way, I've always said, it's the deepest position in football, guys. Deepest position in football at any level. Go look at a high school football game in Texas. They all got good wide receivers. You're like, man, actually, wide receivers look pretty good. Everybody's got good wide receivers. It's proliferation of the spread offense. Everybody's got good wide receivers. Why does Texas get a good wide receiver in the transfer pool every year? Because there are tons of them. They're everywhere. All right. They always say it's the deepest position in the draft every year in the draft. Why? They're going to say it again. It's just that's the nature of the beast right now at wide receiver. And man, I haven't looked at this crop of wide receivers this year, but I can tell you right now that if Matthew Golden is anywhere close to being the top receiver in this draft class, nobody's increased their draft stock more. Nobody. That is phenomenal. He does have great body control. He's a better deep threat than I thought. He runs precision routes. He's better in contested catches than I thought. Trustworthy hands. He's got a little bit more speed in terms of his separation, able to stack defenders. He just keeps surprising me. He kept surprising me. I kept thinking, he maybe have hit his ceiling. And every time I thought he hit his ceiling as a player, he would smash right through it. I'm like, yeah, but I don't know if he's a deep threat. Boom, he'd be a deep threat. It's like, yeah, I don't know if he can make contested catches his size. He can make contested catches. It's like, oh, I don't know if he can go up and, make catches where he's got to, show off his vertical leap and he's got to go up over top of defenders. And late in the season, he started doing that too. There wasn't anything as a scout that you would covet from a wide receiver that he did not display throughout the season. So it was a masterclass. I know why he's leaving. He's not going to do better than that. They used him inside. They used him outside. He's in the red zone, deep threat, on third down, precision routes, contested catches, yak, whatever you need to see. He showed you. So Matthew Golden's going to get drafted pretty damn high. Not just mid rounds. You talking about second round, he may be a top 50 guy when it's all said and done, just kind of looking at it. Okay. So that's another guy that's going to be drafted. Then you got Quinn Ewers, of course, will be drafted. We'll talk about Quinn. I know that's a much lengthier conversation. Alfred Collins, who's going to be a second round pick. I remember seeing several draft scouts, at least draft analysts, I should say, saying that he's got a second round grade on a lot of people's boards. Gunnar Helm is going to be one of the top tight ends. I say mid round pick just because tight end it's not a premium position. Andrew Makuba. I think Makuba's a guy that gets drafted fourth, anywhere from the fourth to the sixth round, somewhere around there. Baron Sorrell. I like Baron Sorrell's game. He doesn't need any elite pass rusher necessarily, but that's a guy that's going to be on an NFL roster for 5, 6, 7 years. I mean, he's an NFL to me. He's got an NFL body, and I think he's got an NFL skill set. So not sure exactly what will be drafted. It'll depend on how he tests and then how deep the edge position is. Edge is a coveted premium position, but mostly for pass rushing edges, and that's not necessarily Baron Sorrell, but he is very, very consistent. You got Jake Majors. I don't know why center is not a premium position. It's not. But Jake Majors, I think, is going to make an NFL roster. Not sure. It could be a late round pick. Vern Broughton's another guy. I'm not sure about Hayden Connor. I'm not sure about Hayden Connor being drafted. So if we're looking at it, so that's Kelvin Banks, Cam Williams, Janae Barron, Isaiah Bond, Matthew Golden, Quinn Ewers, Alfred Collins, Gunnar Helm, Makuba, Sorrell, Jake Majors makes 11, Vernon Broughton that's 12. If those, and I'm like, I almost feel certain that those 12 will get drafted. I mean, to say that is pretty bold because having double-digit players drafted is a really big accomplishment. But I feel like Texas could do that. They had 11 last year. I think you would have 12 this year. That'll give you 23 players drafted in a 2-year span. Mac Brown never came close to that. Texas had 22 players drafted, I believe, from 2016 to 2023. Man, the record for most players drafted in a 2-year span is Georgia with 25. If Texas gets a couple of other guys on that list, Silas Bowden, Bill Norton, Gavin Holmes, Hayden Connor, they could end up, Trey Moore, if he declares, they could end up in that conversation. That's quite an accomplishment for Sark. I think you're going to get 12 players drafted. I would say between 10 to 12. I should say that. Not to get too cocky for Texas, but talk about first world problems. Now your issue is you have so many players leaving, you have no idea how your roster is really going to look in 2025. And you went from not being able to develop players to have draftable grades. Now you're developing a double-digit draftable players potentially in the upcoming draft. So it's good news and bad news. First world problems for Texas. The Cowboys got third world problems. We'll come back and talk about the Cowboys, even Sark being one of the potential candidates and options for the Cowboys coaching vacancy. All of that and more, and what we learned from the playoff games this past weekend right here, coming back on the Craig Way Show right here on AM 1300. Welcome back to the Craig Way Show. No Craig Way today. I'm Lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Sometimes I wish I was Craig Way, but trust me, I don't have the intellect or the the talent that Craig Way does. But Craig Way will be back next week. So will Cam Parker. I'm just sitting in for those guys, and I appreciate them giving me the opportunity to sit in here and guest host the Craig Way Show today. We'll talk about the NFL playoffs and what we saw in the first week of the NFL playoffs, even what we saw last night. The Old Testament, old biblical style butt whipping that the Rams, Craig Way's Rams, by the way, I'm sure my man Craig Way was excited about that they put on the Minnesota Vikings. And yes, the Sam Darnold, it seems like that fairy tale story may be coming to an end. Yeah, I know a lot of people were excited about it. And what I liked about the Sam Darnold story, and the same thing I like about, still I like about Jared Goff's story, even Matthew Stafford's story, you're seeing more and more quarterbacks in the NFL that have shown that you can take the road less traveled to still get to being a franchise quarterback, or to reinventing yourself, or resuscitating your skill set as a player. Now, Kevin O'Connell might be considered kind of a made man because Kirk Cousins played one of his best seasons under Kevin O'Connell, the Vikings head coach, and then you get Sam Darnold, and you're able to win 14 games with basically Sam Darnold as your starting quarterback. And then you're gonna see what he does with JJ McCarthy. But I mean, once you prove to the NFL that you can resuscitate the skill set of a quarterback, that you can reinvent a quarterback, basically you become a made man. And that's he's getting kind of some made man status among NFL coaches. We'll get into it. We'll talk about that, kind of what we learned in the playoff game, what we know about Sean McVay. And Sean McVay's a hell of a coach. Sean McVay's a great coach. He does, and he took advantage of, and was kind of one of the the main facilitators of switching franchise quarterbacks, right? And it got to a Super Bowl with Jared Goff. Most franchises, they get to a Super Bowl with a quarterback, they decide, no, this is going to be my guy, not Sean McVay. Got to the Super Bowl with a franchise quarterback and decided, yeah, he's not good enough. Ironically, decided he wasn't good enough for the Rams, traded him to the Lions. Lions thought, oh man, we'll bring in Jared Goff. Jared Goff will be our stopgap bridge quarterback till we figure out what we're going to do. And turns out, that one night stand that ended up becoming the love of your life. That's Jared Goff. And they didn't know he was going to be that. They got a happy accident. And you know what? That happens at quarterback, right? Because quarterback is the toughest position to project and to develop. So you get happy accidents at times because you got to keep rolling the dice on quarterback. Got to. And Jared Goff, some people thought, oh man, he's limited, but not in the Detroit Lions offense. That's why, to me, it's all about compatibility. I've always said choosing a quarterback is like choosing a significant other. The woman or man you marry is not always the hottest woman or man you ever dated. They were the one that was most compatible with you, the one that was right for you. And when you find out one that's right for you, then all the pieces fit. Same thing about quarterback. It's all about finding the right one. Jared Goff didn't fit. We're finding more of those stories, right? And I've said that for years. You guys have heard me saying it for like a decade now. But then you're starting to see it. Baker Mayfield is one of those stories. Jared Goff is one of those stories. Matt Stafford's one of those stories. Fit right into Sean McVay's system. Oh, clicked. Super Bowl. Right? And some people just, you got the GOAT, that's the GOAT, and that's Tom Brady. So Tom Brady, he was able to go to another team and win it with another franchise his first year, because he's the GOAT. But even with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, I mean, that was just the compatibility of that QB skill set with the acumen and the the football intellect of Andy Reid. It's like putting together it's like when Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones got together. Like, it's like what I mean? Like, it's like one of those. It's like Dr. Dre and Eminem. When they got together, it's like, oh, that's it. Oh, that's once you mix those two elements, you're gonna get greatness. And that's what you're trying to find. That's your job as a GM. You're a matchmaker, and you're trying to find that perfect coach with the perfect quarterback. Goes back to my 5-year rule, right? The 5-year rule. Started the show talking about the 5-year rule. And this is what the Cowboys did. This is why I think Jerry Jones made the move that he made. You haven't seen a head coach and a quarterback combination. All right. Just look at the head coach and the QB, because those are your two most important elements, arguably, when you talk about winning a Super Bowl. Head coach and quarterback. In the history of the Super Bowl era we're talking about, no team has ever won its first Super Bowl by starting the same quarterback for the same head coach for more than 5 seasons. Outside of that, it's actually 2 5-year rules. The other 5-year rule is, I think once you get a head coach, period, if he can't show you in his first 5 years that he's a Super Bowl caliber coach, history does suggest you need to move on. Because the NFL is the windows that the NFL actually, the infrastructure with the salary cap and the rookie wage scale and the way the draft is set up, it's all kind of set up for 5-year windows. The NFL doesn't want a lot of dynasties, and it's not meant for dynasty, which is why we've never seen anybody win 3 in a row. We're about to see that potentially for the first time with Kansas City, because the NFL is not built for that. Right? It's actually built to sell hope and change, if you will. Because it wants its fan bases to, even the ones who are at the lower end of the NFL hierarchy, it wants them to always have hope. That's why you'll get your top draft pick. Right? It will help you out. And that's why the NFL, essentially their CBA, which is essentially their tax code, they incentivize you to draft quarterbacks. Bring in a new quarterback. That's why the young quarterbacks are cheaper now. They're cheaper. Bring in a new one. If you don't like your quarterback, move on. Ship him off somewhere else and go find another one. Go draft another one. Which is why we're seeing now the road less traveled for some quarterbacks who can go elsewhere and reinvent themselves. And I love those stories. Those are cool stories that you're seeing now in the NFL playoffs at the highest levels. Those are really cool stories. But anyway, getting back to my 5-year rule. It was 35 coaches who have won a Super Bowl, I believe. 35 head coaches. 30 of them did it within the first 5 years. 5 years. Mike McCarthy got 5 years. 5 years. I know it sounds like a short time. You can't do it in 5 years. You wasn't gonna do it. That's the way the NFL. You ain't doing it in 5 years. There now, if you can do it outside of 5 years, the guys that have done it outside of 5 years, they're like elite, all-time great exceptions. Chuck Noll, Andy Reid, Tom Landry, John Madden, and Bill Connor. Those are the ones. The rest of it, 5 years. They're exceptions to every rule. Those are your exceptions. Do you have that? If you got that, okay, roll with it. Now, you know who's banking that they have that? The Bills, with Sean McDermott, and the Ravens with John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson. They might be able to shatter the 5-year rule. They might be able to do it. It's Josh Allen. You got an elite quarterback. You got Lamar Jackson, elite quarterback. You got John Harbaugh, I think, is one of the best head coaches in football. Already he's got a Super Bowl under his resume. But he and Lamar Jackson don't have one. And like I said, the history would suggest with the 5-year rule that if Lamar Jackson was going to do it, he's already won 2 MVPs, he'd have done it already. And you can make the argument, oh, that's because Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, every generation's got one. Tom Brady before that, Joe Montana before that. You got to vanquish. You're going to have to vanquish that, that big dog on the mountain, right? If you want to beat a man, you got to beat the man. That's what CJ Stroud's hoping to do, Josh Allen's hoping to do, and Lamar Jackson. Take down Patrick Mahomes. And it ain't going to be easy. I think we all know how this story ends, truth be told. I'm a Texans fan. I am rooting for I'm going to break down how the Texans can upset the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm going to do it. All right. I predicted actually, remember when the Texans were up like 3 touchdowns on the Kansas City Chiefs on the road? Bill O'Brien's kind of last stand. Remember that? I predicted that game that they would beat the Chiefs. And I was dancing on the tabletops when they were up by like 3 touchdowns. I was like, they're going to beat them. But that's before I learned that Patrick Mahomes is the most clutch quarterback, arguably, in the history of the NFL. And that no quarterback in the history of the NFL, no quarterback is better, especially in the playoffs, which they were, when they're down double digits. He's got the best winning percentage in the league, down double digits, and that's exactly it. They came back and won. They actually were leading before halftime, if I'm not mistaken. Heartbreak. They get to face him again. I'm going to break down how the Texans can beat the Chiefs. Do I believe it? No. I don't believe it. No. And I feel like we know how the story is going to end. We know Lamar Jackson's probably having an MVP year. He might win his third MVP. That's crazy. That's insane. And his legacy is going to be that he potentially just couldn't beat Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Everybody in the Michael Jordan era in the NBA had to deal with. So I'm not. It's hard to pick against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Hard to do that. Period. No matter what you talk about, we'll get into that. We'll talk about. I think the lesson learned though is that both the Ravens and the Bills are going to be trying to shatter that 5-year rule. And history would suggest that neither one of them will do it. And the Kansas City Chiefs are probably going to make me right in that regard. Okay, we'll talk about what we learned from the playoff games. And we'll get into the one last night, obviously. We'll talk about the ones from over the weekend. We'll also get into the departures on the 40 acres, talk some Texas football. Yeah, I'll give you my thoughts about Texas losing to Ohio State. I'll talk about Sark a little bit too. Will Sark be the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys? That is actually a conversation that is being had. And we will have it as well coming back right here on the Craig Way Show, right here on AM 1300. The Zone. Cam Barker, for giving me the chance. Let's talk about what we learned in the game last night, and then we'll get to talking about the Cowboys coaching vacancy and Steve Sarkisian potentially being one of the candidates, not for that job, but not just for that job, I should say, but for other jobs as well. Okay, last night, Vikings lose to the Rams 27-9. All of the most of the, except for that Commanders and Bucks game, most of the first round of the playoffs have been pretty lopsided wins. And another one with the Rams putting an Old Testament style butt whipping on the Vikings. They sacked Sam Darnold 9 times. It was a record, actually tied a record. Basically, it was tied with the Titans did it to the Bengals in 2022 in the divisional round. They got 9 sacks. The I think I kind of remember this actually as trauma as a child. The Chiefs did it to the Oilers at the Oilers. Love you blue. I'm a love you blue guy from H-Town. 94 in divisional round. Oh man, that Joe Montana and Marcus Allen. I believe that may be it. If I'm off, let me know, guys. I was a youngster there, but I believe that is the occasion. That's sad. The 85 Bears did it. The 49ers did it actually versus the Bears, I should say. That happened in 85. 87, the Browns did it versus the Jets in divisional round. Point being, doesn't happen a lot. And Sam Darnold, I believe that Sam Darnold's contract. I believe his value probably dropped in that game, taking that many sacks. It was the third worst. If you go look at it, he had the third worst total sack EPA by any quarterback in any game played since 2000. Just a lack of awareness overall. Quarterback sacks are now, at least by analytical terms, now they are sometimes attributed to the quarterback. Longhorn fans know this. Love Quinn, but Quinn at times can known to be a self-sacker. All right, just kind of running instead of finding space in the pocket. They kind of run into defenders in the pocket, just having that lack of awareness. That was definitely the case for Sam Darnold. So the Rams are moving on. I'm sure Craig Way is happy about that. One thing I will say about the Rams, because first of all, Matt Stafford, they got themselves a franchise quarterback, an elite quarterback that helps, but they got an elite coach too. That's why the Rams are indeed dangerous. Because Sean McVay can coach, man. One thing that makes Sean McVay unique, nobody in the NFL has had more coaching turnover than Sean McVay. Nobody. And I went and looked at historically, and went and looked at, how many, great coaches. First of all, not a lot of coaches stick around that long anyway, because he's been around since 2017. And how many coaches who won Super Bowls have as much turnover as he had. Remember in those first few years when he was considered the golden child. The only staff I found, like literally historically in the Super Bowl era, that compares is the Bill Walsh staff from 79 to 84 and how much attrition he had on there from all those great coaches that he was hiring. But that's what makes Sean McVay unique. That they can reinvent that organization, or at least reinvent the football product, which he has done multiple times. And man, as long as they got him, and it seems like the GM, Les Snead, has done a great job too. They have been able to at least compete and put out a playoff caliber product. Year after year. Not every year he's been there. I think he had one year where he's fallen off, but other than that, man, Sean McVay always coaching his tail off. Speaking of, the Cowboys are looking to find themselves a Sean McVay. Right? Remember, Sean McVay was considered one of those prodigies coming up. Hell, the Texans had a couple of prodigies on their staff at one point. Hopefully, I like DeMeco Ryans, by the way. We'll get to some Texans talk too. But if you are the Cowboys right now, I mean, that's ultimately the goal, to hire a what you would like is to hire a young, up and coming, fast rising star who's got Super Bowl caliber coach written all over him. It doesn't always look that way, so it's hard to determine, hey, is this guy going to be it, or is this just a flash in the pan? And it may look different. Dan Campbell looked very different. Nobody thought Dan Campbell would put the Detroit Lions in a position to be a Super Bowl contender, right? People laughed and mocked Dan Campbell. He's talking about eating knees, right? He really was. He was talking about doing some crazy stuff. And he's more of a motivator than anything, but it's the right kind of crazy for Detroit. So you got to find some about compatibility. So we'll see if that's what the Cowboys are talking about. But one of the things that caught Longhorn fans' eyes was that Adam Schefter, who's the ultimate insider for the NFL, when he was talking about potential candidates that the Cowboys could be interested in. And I've heard him even mention, Sark's name when he's talking about other openings as well. But for the Cowboys, it is a name that has come up. Here is Adam Schefter on the Pat McAfee show when they asked him about, whether this is about jobs, period, about Sark and Sark being a name that has been mentioned for multiple job openings because of his NFL connections and his NFL background.
He did sign that deal recently. I don't know whether that's leverage or not. I have no idea. I don't have direct information beyond that. Steve Sarkisian is a name that has swirled around out there in NFL circles for weeks now. His season's over. They're a team. If there were a team that wants to talk to him, they obviously could go do that. And we'll see whether or not he has interest in going back to the NFL. But that's a name that's been out there for a little while.
He has been out there for a while, and he's been talking about it for a while. He's been talking about it for a few weeks now. He's been mentioning Sark's name, and even before the Cowboys job came open, and some people have brought up about the Cowboys job. I will say, when I looked at the odds, the latest odds on who's going to be the Cowboys' next head coach, Sark wasn't even he's far down the list. He's not even really, he's really far down the list. Kellen Moore, Deion Sanders, Cliff Kingsbury, Joe Brady, Ben Johnson, Belichick, Lane Kiffin. But for Longhorn fans, I don't think you have anything to worry about right now. I think Sark wants to win a national title at Texas. I think he wants to coach a Manning. I think he wants that relationship. All right. The first family of football. That's important. It is. I think he believes that Arch Manning can be a championship caliber quarterback that can help him accomplish that goal. So I think you got at least until he's done with Arch. And I think Arch is going to be here 2 years, which is what has been reported. I don't think he's going anywhere for 2 years. I don't think he's going anywhere, honestly, until he wins a national title. I think he believes, and I do too, considering you've been, in the Final Four the last 2 years and a couple of red zone possessions away from competing, in a national championship game. You're pretty close. And I think the belief is that Arch Manning will elevate the quarterback position, which will elevate the team. And I think Sark wants to check that off his list. I think he wants to be Pete Carroll. I think he wants to win. I think he wants to be known as ball coach. It's a whole nother category as a ball coach. There are all-time great college coaches, all-time great NFL coaches. But the ball coaches, the Pete Carrolls and the Jim Harbaugh's kind of got that reputation, even though he hasn't won a Super Bowl, but been to a Super Bowl as a coach in the NFL. Guys who just can coach ball, doesn't matter what the level is. I coach ball. Some of y'all need to recruit because that's y'all's thing. Some of y'all need the NFL because you can't recruit at the college level because you don't have the communication skills or the people skills to be able to do it. Put me anywhere I can go coach ball. That's a whole not even Nick Saban can say he did that. Nick Saban can't say he did that. Been able to have an extreme amount of success at both. I think Sark wants to be one of those coaches who's won a national title and also could win the Super Bowl too. That would be his goal if he goes to the league. I do believe he has NFL aspirations. I do. It's a guy that at one point was on the track as a prodigy before things got derailed, and that was a path that was taking him to the NFL. I think he has had those dreams for a while. So I'm not saying that it's going to lead him away from Texas, but I just think when it presents itself at the right time, I think Sark would be interested, but not until he wins a national title in Texas. So that's your good news. Yeah, I think he's gonna win it here first, and then you'll have to worry about that. But those are first world problems, as Stark says, crying from a yacht. I mean, this is phrase, crying from a yacht, which is what Longhorn fans are doing these days. It's a beautiful thing. All right, well, we'll talk some more Texas football. We'll talk about what we learned from some of the other playoff games over the weekend, all of that and more coming back right here on the Craig Way Show on AM 1300 The Zone. Mhm. from the Bucks and the Commanders playoff game, which was the only one that actually came down to the wire. And once again, Jaden Daniels was the difference. The Commanders won 23-20. This is what some are calling, and we just witnessed, I think, what a lot of people said was the greatest rookie season ever for a quarterback, what CJ Stroud did with the Texans last season. Jaden Daniels has surpassed that. First rookie in NFL history to lead his team in passing and rushing yards in a playoff game. By the way, he led his team in passing and rushing yards during the season too. Which, by the way, it's not easy. Like, that is, how often do you think that happens, where a player leads in the NFL, all right, lead their team in passing and rushing, and not only do that, but then do it successfully? Not just do it for like a bad team. I can see a quarterback doing it for a bad team. You're a unique elite athlete doing it for a bad team. They don't have running backs. They don't have options. O-line is terrible. So, of course, you're leading team in passing, but you end up leading team in rushing through because scrambling yards, and you're running for life. And oftentimes you don't have, weapons around you. But he's doing it for a team that's, won a playoff game now. He's a rookie. That doesn't happen. I went back and looked at it. You've got 14 players in NFL history who led their team in rushing and passing. 14 total. 27 times. So these 14 players some of them have done it multiple times. The list of it, and in the modern era, it's actually now, I think, increasing now and more in the modern era with the quarterback renaissance, more and more quarterbacks that are some of the best athletes on the team. And now you're starting to see more and more this is more of an occurrence that you didn't see back in the day. But it was, you go get, I think Justin Fields was one of the latest. He did it in 2023. This past season, Jaden Daniels did it. So he's added to the list. That would make 15 players. So I said 14, 15. Add Jaden Daniels to the list. That makes 15. Justin Fields on the list. Toby Rote, Charlie Trippy, Al Darrow. These are names in the 50s and the 60s. So don't even obviously Justin Fields, and Jaden Daniels, but the guys here I'm starting with in the 50s and 60s. Robin Tote, Charlie Trippy. I'm sure they had some really cool nicknames. Al Darrow. Then in 1960, Lenny Moore did it. And that kind of starts more the modern era. Bobby Douglas in 1972 did it. Randall Cunningham. Then guys like Donovan McNabb, Cam Newton, Russell Wilson, Josh Allen did it. Lamar Jackson did it. Jalen Hurts did it as well. And Ryan Fitzpatrick did it, which is kind of weird. I'm talking about like for bad teams, something freaky. But yeah, so it doesn't happen a lot. But to do it, and he's probably going to do it multiple times because he's just that talented. He's just that much of a weapon. He's like Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson didn't do it this year because they got Derrick Henry. He did it in 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. He led them in passing and rushing. Freaky. Randall Cunningham was also like that too. Young people probably don't know it. You should Google it. 87, 88, 89, 90. Basically, he kind of had a Patrick Mahomes like skill set, honestly. Jeff, how used to always make the comparison. It very much so. Like he was more had more of a long-legged stride. He can run, but he was a freak. He used to punt too, I think. Man, Randall Cunningham was one of the best athletes in the history of the league. So that's the list. But my point is Jaden Daniels is on that list as a rookie. I haven't even looked at the list and see how many of them did it as a rookie, but to do it as a rookie and win a playoff game. And this season, he's clutch too. When the game is tied or they're down by one score in the fourth quarter overtime, he's clutch. 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 117 passer rating, got 5 comeback wins. I will admit, and I'm a Texans fan, so I'm a CJ Stroud fan. What he's done, second rookie QB in NFL history to have 300 plus total yards and 2+ passing touchdowns. 0 interceptions in his playoff debut. That's some freaky stuff. The freakiest stat associated with him is the 0 punt, 0 turnover games. Jaden Daniels has more games in his career where his team had 0 punts and 0 turnovers. 3, including that last playoff game. than the combined careers of Tom Brady, Joe Montana, Peyton Manning, and Patrick Mahomes. Like, isn't that crazy? I mean, that's a wild stat. The zero punt, I don't even know, zero punt, zero turnover game, and he's done it multiple times this year. And he's got 5 fourth quarter comeback wins as a rookie. That is tied for the most comeback wins by a rookie in NFL history. Oh, by the way, little tidbit: VY had 4. Isn't that good? VY had 4 of them. So did Andrew Luck and Russell Wilson. He had the clutch gene. He wasn't necessarily an efficient NFL quarterback, but one thing we know about VY, dude had the clutch gene. That's short. And it's something about Jay Dan. He's got the clutch gene. He's got the clutch gene. He's also really efficient. I think he was top 10 in if you look at overall in the QBR and passer rating. I mean, he performed like a top 10 quarterback as a rookie. That's what you learned about that game, is that Jayden Daniels, I mean, I would say he may have solidified his claim for having the best rookie season in the history of the NFL. And all season long, man, he's been making plays like that, just spectacular, freaky plays like that all season long. All right, let's discuss really quickly the Cowboys, the head coaching. We've been talking about it all day, but the head coaching vacancy for the Cowboys, because right now there are reports that Deion seems to be the front runner for the job. If Deion, I will say this about Deion, because Deion would understand Jerry's culture and the way Jerry works. That's possible. Jerry, right now, Jerry, I'm sure, would be willing to listen to a few select people in his circle. I think Deion could be one of those people that Jerry would listen to, which meaning if, you could influence Jerry's decisions, I think Deion could do it. If indeed we're talking about Deion as the guy. It's to me, I haven't seen Deion as a coach without Shedeur, so that would be something. But I'll say this about Deion and Jerry: if it's gonna be must-watch television, there ain't no doubt about it. It'd be probably the greatest show that the NFL has had in a really long time. And they have a lot of these when the quarterbacks change or head coaching changes. But having Deion Sanders as your coach, it would definitely make you prime time. The Cowboys are already the number one TV star on the number one TV show. Talk about upping the ante. All right, we'll come back. We'll discuss that. We'll also get back to some of the other playoff games, what we learned. We'll talk about some of the Texas football departures, guys who are leaving to go to the NFL. All that and more right here on the Craig Way Show on AM 1300 The Zone.
by using the talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app. Right, something.
All right, welcome back to the Craig Way Show. I'm Lifetime Longhorn Rod Baby, sitting in for the one and only Craig Way. So I appreciate Craig giving me the time. Just talking about some of the playoff games, and really talking about some Texas football as well. As a matter of fact, I want to talk a little bit about that. The goal line stand for Ohio State. Jim Knowles was asked to describe the goal line stand. I think I want to play that audio for you coming up. So we'll get into that. Talk some Texas football. Talk about all the departures, the guys who have exhausted eligibility and those who have declared early for the upcoming NFL draft. We'll dive into it. But getting back to the NFL playoffs just a little bit, one of the things I just noticed, because I was just talking about Jayden Daniels and how great Jayden Daniels has been, and the 3 games he's had with 0 punts and 0 turnovers, and how freaky that is. And he led his team in rushing and also in passing, which I explain to you how rare that is. 15 players have done it in NFL history. He's one of those 15 players. So you got your basically your final 8 teams, and 4 of them will have quarterbacks that are on this list of 15 players in NFL history who have led their team in passing and rushing in the same season. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, and Jayden Daniels, which tells you a little bit about the trend, and right, and where things are going in terms of the quarterback position. Right, only 15 players in the history of the league have led their team in passing and rushing. 4 of those 15 players will be playing, or still playing in the playoffs. Right, that's where, and the crazy part about it is, I tell people this all the time. And when we start breaking down the Texans and the Chiefs, we'll get into it more. Patrick Mahomes is a dual threat quarterback masquerading as a pocket passer. We watched him in Big 12 play here at Texas. I watched him, and I remember him as a dual threat quarterback and running a lot at Texas Tech as a player. And when he got to the NFL, he became such a dynamic passer that people kind of forgot about his legs, his ability to run. But the truth is, he can run, but only does it in games that matter. Like he only chooses to use his legs when the games matter most, and it's usually in the playoffs. So I would say in the playoffs, Patrick Mahomes becomes more of a dual threat quarterback. He even did down some stretches late in the season because they had so many walk-off wins. Really, they had like 6 or 7 walk-off wins this year. So he needed to use his legs, but it's only when he's got to have it in situations. And Patrick Mahomes, he's right up there. Like he's right up there with, you look at most playoff rushing yards by a quarterback, Patrick Mahomes is like up there, at least recently. I think he's up there with Lamar Jackson's got 602, Josh Allen 609, Russell Wilson 533, Steve Young 594, Patrick Mahomes 524. I'm telling you, that's when his legs come to life. Got to watch it. But anyway, he's not on that list. But my point is, he's still among that group, in my opinion. Game is changing. These playoffs are a prime example of it. All right, let's talk about the Dallas. Let's talk about, you know what? First of all, let's get into one more matchup. At least, one of the victors and one of the losers of the playoff matchups this past weekend. Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. And this, we know that I know Mike Tomlin's a damn good coach. I think Mike Tomlin's going to end up being a Hall of Fame coach when it's all said and done. But there are some people that believe that the Steelers need to move on from Mike Tomlin. And, maybe they do need to move on from Mike Tomlin. I think the big issue with Mike Tomlin, and I've said it before, because the Ravens right now, the way they're built and constructed, that Steelers team, they just can't score enough points to even contend with the Ravens. They usually match up pretty well with them within the division, but they can't contend with them when it comes to scoring anywhere in the high 20s or in the 30s, right? Mike Tomlin's teams are built to score around 24 points. That's really where the kind of the line is drawn. Anytime after that, it's a shootout, and unless they have the quarterback and the firepower, then Mike Tomlin's teams lately, they're usually, going to be outmatched. And that's what's been happening in the playoffs for Mike Tomlin's teams. So he hadn't been able to win a playoff game. He hasn't been able to win a playoff game, in my opinion, mostly because he hasn't had, a quarterback playing at an elite level or an elite quarterback. But people forget when you start looking at these all-time great coaches. I've been tracking, all-time great coaches and their, kind of path to greatness, if you will. How many of them were able to win without a Hall of Fame quarterback or a quarterback that became a Hall of Fame quarterback at one point? It's just really tough. Now, maybe you can win a playoff game or two, but you ain't gonna win it all. It's just there are exceptions to the rule, but most of the time, you look at a coach that's a great coach, they're associated with a quarterback that's also become a Hall of Famer. I track like 8 coaches that were able to win a Super Bowl without a quarterback that is now considered a Hall of Famer or will be considered one. Bill Parcells, that's why Bill Parcells is considered made men among made men, right? Because winning with Phil Simms and Jeff Hostetler, there ain't no Hall of Fame quarterbacks. Joe Gibbs, I always, champion Joe Gibbs as one of the all-time greats. Won it with Joe Theismann, Doug Williams, Mark Rippon were his quarterbacks, those guys. Tom Flores should get more recognition. Dan Pastorini and Jim Plunkett were his quarterbacks, and he won it. Good quarterbacks, not Hall of Famers. John Gruden. That's why John Gruden still gets a lot of love. Brad Johnson. Now he had an all-time great defense, and that's usually the formula. Either you got an all-time great quarterback or you got an all-time great defense. Russell Wilson. Is Russell Wilson going to be a Hall of Famer? I don't know. I think he was on his pathway to being one, and then things got derailed for him. It's usually one or the other, but it's hard to do it without one. Now people are saying Matthew Stafford's a Hall of Famer, after winning a Super Bowl. So for Mike Tomlin, I think Mike Tomlin is a damn good coach. I think Mike Tomlin will get you to the playoffs. But if you look at the Cowboys. If you want to get further in the playoffs, if you want to get further in like the divisional round, you're going to need your quarterback to put the cape on at one point. Yes, your coaching can give you a schematic advantage, but ultimately at the highest level, you need a quarterback that can put the cape on and go out there and make extraordinary plays in critical moments. And that's what Dak hasn't really been able to do, which we'll talk about on the other side. So Cowboys fans are a little bit frustrated with that. That's what CJ Stroud's going to have to do if he's going to beat Patrick Mahomes and take down the juggernaut on a dynastic run trying to win 3 in a row that is the Kansas City Chiefs. That's what it comes down to. We saw Tom Brady do it. I went to the Super Bowl last year and watched Patrick Mahomes do it in person against the 49ers. And the cape wasn't literal, but man, you can see it. All right, we come back. We'll talk about the goal line stand for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Jim Knowles gives his description on it. We'll also get back to the Cowboys vacancy. Deion Sanders, the front runner for that Cowboys job. That is a blockbuster of a headline. We'll get to that and more right here on the Craig Way Show. I'm Rod Babers coming back right here on the Zone. All right, let me send you this.
Longhorns and Hall of Fame broadcaster, Craig Way.
Mike's open.
All right, welcome back to the Craig Way Show here on AM 1300 The Zone. We'll get to some audio from Adam Schefter talking about the Dallas Cowboys head coaching vacancy. We'll also get some audio that we have of Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator from Ohio State, describing what he, at least from his vantage point, what he called versus Texas on that first and goal, second and goal, third and goal, and the obviously pivotal fourth and goal where they end up getting the strip sack for a touchdown. So we'll get his thoughts on it. We'll discuss a little bit. We'll also discuss the players who are departing Texas football, heading to the NFL. We'll get into that list and talk about how the 2025 roster is going to look a little bit for the Longhorns. And also we'll discuss some of the other playoff games from this past weekend and then look ahead to the playoff matchups that we got coming up, including the Houston Texans. So let's not waste any time. Let's dive right into it. Jim Knowles recently spoke to the media, and one of the questions they asked him, I've been looking for this because I was like, man, I wonder when we're going to hear Ohio State's side of that, of what happened and on the goal line and what they called. And sorry, Longhorn fans, to bring it up again. I know some of y'all in y'all stages of grief, y'all are past this already. Y'all are at the acceptance phase, and I apologize. But I wanted to hit this because I just saw it, and I think it just came out today. Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator of Ohio State, here's him describing what he called on the first and goal sequence for for Ohio State versus Texas in that matchup.
First play, we got into big people. Boom, stop. Second play, still. Yeah. That's what you guys
All right, there you go. That actually was very insightful because he's basically telling you that he was in heavy personnel. They were on the goal line, so he's in goal line defense, got big guys out there. And that would support Sark's, at least, the play call. And probably Sark's thought process that I'm going to go wide. I'm going to pitch it. And even he said it in the clip we just played that, obviously that leaves them vulnerable to pitches and tosses because they were going big personnel. And that's probably why Sark decided to pitch and toss it. It didn't work. It wouldn't have been considered such a bad call if anybody had executed it. Any of the players had executed, but basically all the players from Texas offensively, they got beat because Ohio State was so well prepared. And they triggered quickly. And on top of the play call being a play call, you're trying to surprise them. It didn't surprise them. And then, players just lost their one-on-one battles. That does happen. Usually don't happen all at one time. But then I love that he pointed out also that he called a red zone call, a red zone coverage on third down and fourth down, and they hadn't called all year. So we hadn't run it. Quinn hadn't seen it. Quinn hadn't seen it at all, and they decided to run it again on 4th down after being successful on 3rd down. Sawyer got pressure on that 3rd down, and then Sawyer actually got the strip sack on 4th down. So, and I believe on that pressure on 3rd down, he was actually matched up on. I think he's matched up on the interior. I think he ended up like on either Hayden Conner getting that pressure somehow. But either way, there's your insight that's probably why Sark called the toss. They were vulnerable there because they were going big, but they were well prepared for Sark. And the reason that Quinn looked so slow to process on 3rd and 4th down is because he had not seen that coverage on film. Got to break tendency to win in big games. I always said you got to break tendency if you want to win big games. And I don't think Texas broke tendency enough. You guys know, I think Texas could have broke tendency a little bit more in that game and might have made a bigger difference. And I'm not a lot of folks that are really critical of Sark and what he said. I think Sark's done a good job. I think there are some things that Sark's still evolving and growing. There are some things that he's still growing with as a coach. I still think there's a part of his development overall as a coach that we're seeing. I think his red zone play calling, that's still something he's starting to he's figuring out. Post Bijan and Rojo, we haven't seen Texas red zone offense look very good. Let's be honest. It was really good during Bijan and Rojo's time here in Texas. And once you lost Bijan and Rojo, it really had a precipitous decline in red zone productivity and efficiency. So got to work on that. You've lost 5 games the last 2 years, and 3 of those you've been denied on a goal line stand, and in 3 of the 5 you've had either a goal line, you've been denied on the goal line stand, or you were failed to score in the red zone, and it cost you. Failed to score points in the red zone. That was Washington, Oklahoma, and now obviously Ohio State. So that's a theme. All your losses this year, where was your running game? Didn't have one. Didn't have a running game versus Ohio State. Didn't have a running game versus Georgia both times. Didn't have a running game versus Arizona State, but won it on 4th and 13 thanks to the testicular fortitude and a hell of a throw by Quinn Ewers, hell of a call by Sark, being clutch, and that's great. But that's the only reason you won it. So there's another thing there, right? You got to be able to boost. You got to be able to pivot in your running game and be able to have different, contingency plans when someone stops your wide zone and your outside zone, which is what Georgia did and what Arizona State did and what Ohio State did. And once they do that, Texas really has no answer. Got to figure that out. So that's still, but I think that those are things for Sark that have existed just beyond this season. Right, you've had red zone issues for multiple years. Your goal line issues have existed also. Goal line issues with most people. There's a reason Sark decides to go with a end and around and a reverse versus Georgia and Arizona State on a 3rd and short in the 4th and 1. As a 4th and 2, I believe it was, and a 3rd and 2 versus Arizona State. And we all applaud his brilliant play design and go, Sark, that's amazing. But truly, it's distracting us from the issue, which is, why can't you just line up with these big humans and run it down somebody's damn throat when you need 2 yards or need a yard? Why can't you run the ball when everybody knows you got to get a yard? Why can't we just line up and get a yard? Whether it be by putting the quarterback under center for a quarterback sneak, or it be running it downhill, down their throat with an old school fullback, whatever it may be, or just using the big humans that Texas champions and brags about. That's the real issue, which was ultimately exposed, right? And I remember saying it when they did it versus Georgia. I was like, man, an ending around on a 4th and 2, it's definitely surprising. And you want to use deception and catch your opponent off guard, but it's risky versus a really good defense like Georgia. And is it just because he doesn't believe they can line up and run it and get 2 yards versus a good defense and a stout defensive front? Probably so. Now looking back, probably so. That's probably a reason for the toss too. And you know what? Maybe he's right. He knows the team better than we do. But I think there's growth from Sark. I think one of my big complaints about Sark is I want to see him become an extremist. When a concept works, you know, I always say Sark doesn't like leftovers and he doesn't play the hits enough in his offense. When something works, let's see it. Let's see it again later that game. Let's see it again the next week. But you don't. Sark like saves them, and he wants moderation in his game plan. He wants to be balanced in his game plans. But what I liked about the game versus Ohio State, hey, the wheel route worked in the red zone. Run it again. If they don't know how to cover it, run it again. I'd run it again until they learn how to stop it, and keep throwing it until they learn how to stop it. And he actually did that, right? And he was stubborn about a concept. We don't see it enough from him. I remember in that Washington game last year, remember the pony package on the second drive? You went right down the field, scored your first touchdown on the pony package, and you only saw it 2 plays for the rest of the game. You averaged 10 yards per play on it. I'm like, why don't we run it more? Right there, and that happens with Sark. They're like the tight end leak play. You ran it to beat Arizona State. That was the last play, the touchdown to Gunnar Helm. You ran it again versus Ohio State, and it worked the very next game. Yeah. And yet we only see it like 4 times a season. I'm like, we should see that. Honestly, I'd break it out like once a game. And I know it'd be easier to defend because you'd see it more, but my point is become an extremist about certain concepts, and I think it will give you an advantage because they work. So we'll see. But that's kind of one of my complaints about the Texas offense a little bit. So there's still growth for Sark in that regard. All right, we come back. We'll get into the Cowboys and their head coaching vacancy. We'll discuss the front runner right now, Deion Sanders. How substantive is that report? We'll hear from Adam Schefter and talk about whether Sark is a realistic possibility. All that and more right here on the Craig Way Show, right here on AM 1300 The Zone. Sometimes I wish I was Craig Way, but I don't have the recall. I don't have the memory, the knowledge, the talent. Just it's not the way. But Craig Way did allow me to guest host the show, so I appreciate Craig Way for letting me sit in today. He and Cam Parker will be back next week, but they let me sit in and guest host the show, so I appreciate that. And time is flying, so we're having a lot of fun on the show. Let's get to the Cowboys and their head coaching vacancy, because one of the things that I think has kind of now become the most salacious and I think eye-grabbing and eye-catching, I should say, headline seems to be Deion Sanders. That he's going to be at least a front runner right now for that Dallas Cowboys job opening. It has been reported that he and Jerry Jones have spoken. I'm a big Deion Sanders fan. I love me some Deion. I did predict that I was like, when Deion at the college level, he's going to have success. And it even before Colorado hired him, I was like, man, whoever hires him, it's a win-win, because he is such a, generational, right? Such a generational personality to be coaching in college, that no matter, even if he failed miserably as a coach, which he has not shown that he can coach some ball, but even if he failed miserably, you would fail forward. You would fail up, because he would stockpile your roster with great talent because he can recruit, right? If I was a 17-year-old, hell, I had Colorado and Texas among my Final Five schools when I was being recruited back in 1999. So if Deion was at Colorado now, and Sark was doing what he's at Texas, I can tell you right now, they would be still among my top 5 schools. Might be in my final 3. Would be Texas and Colorado. And I might end up at one and transferring to the other. Who knows if everything don't work out. But Deion is cool as currency in recruiting, and there's no cooler coach than Deion. Nobody's ever been a Hall of Fame or Pro Football Hall of Famer and come back to coach college. They don't do that. Now it's starting to become more and more complex, but Deion was the first and definitely has done it on a bigger stage than anybody. That's very different than going to the NFL, where you lose all of that cachet because you're not recruiting. Everybody knows you're a Pro Football Hall of Famer, but that happens all the time in the NFL. Pro Football Hall of Famers coach all the time in the league. Coach, they succeed, they fail. Doesn't make you special. You're special in college with being, having that banner, being in that very exclusive club. So here is Adam Schefter, because Adam Schefter, the ultimate insider, he was asked about Deion Sanders. He was recently asked about whether Deion Sanders would consider the job as the Cowboys head coach. Here is Adam Schefter recently on ESPN discussing the Cowboys head coaching vacancy as it relates to Deion.
Adam, let's talk about someone else with connection to the organization.
I wanted the
back in November,
one.
Jerry Jones was asked about Jason Witten and if he would be a good NFL head coach. And without hesitation, he said yes and compared him to Dan Campbell. Is Jason Witten somebody whose name could be on the board for the Dallas Cowboys as they embark on this search for their next head coach?
Yes, Michelle. I believe that he's in that category.
I wanted the first one. The Jason Witten one.
Jerry Jones has for Jason Witten. Now, Jason has done it at this level, but you know what? There have been other coaches that haven't done it and just stepped in, I think, and done well. Jason Witten has been such an impressive guy over such a long period of time, and he's done that in front of Jerry Jones. So you remember the retirement ceremony they had for him when he retired? Like, they rolled out the red carpet for him. He is family to the Joneses. And so, yes, I could see him being involved. And again, like with Deion, I don't know that he's going to be the guy ultimately. I don't know how the Jones family is going to feel as they go through the interview process. I don't know how Jason would feel about that. But I do believe that he'll be a candidate. Yes, a candidate.
Adam, do you believe?
All right, that's the Jason Witten clip, actually, from Adam Schefter. Here is Adam Schefter talking about Deion on that very same show.
That there's mutual intrigue from Jerry Jones.
That if Jerry Jones calls him he's always going to listen. And that's what happened. Now, Deion also has been talking to Colorado and said that, made it very clear he loves it there. Loves it there, and he loves Jerry Jones. And honestly, that's a great spot to be in if you're Deion Sanders, because you're going to have two winning hands here. It's a question of which one you want to play, if you can even play both of them. Now, I don't know that it will get to that point with Dallas. It certainly can. I think back to a conversation that I had about, 16, 17, 18 months ago, where I was talking to an NFL general manager. He said, I got a prediction for you. Mark it down right now. The next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys is going to be Deion Sanders. And I was like, really? Okay. And I always remember that. And lo and behold, Jerry checked in with Deion yesterday, and they'll continue talking. But I said to Deion last night, so what's next? And he said, I don't know. And I said, you don't know? I don't know. So I think everything is really up in the air.
The reason that, I think Deion, if indeed he is interested in coaching the NFL, we don't know. Maybe he just wants to be a college coach. But if he does want to coach the NFL, and you ain't going to get a better opportunity to market yourself as a coach, and Deion Sanders is the ultimate marketing mind, right? In terms of marketing his brand and with the Dallas Cowboys, the number one TV star and number one TV show in America. But you can always go back to college. That's been proven. And college will accept you with open arms. Your failure at the NFL level doesn't matter in college. Ask Matt Rule, ask Nick Saban. Doesn't matter. You can always go to the NFL, fail miserably, come back to college. College will gladly accept you because they know it's kind of two different sports, especially in terms of the talent acquisition. So that's another thing for Deion. If he's worried about it overall hurting his value as a college coach, I don't necessarily think it would. I think teams would still, in college, if he doesn't succeed at the NFL level, give him a chance at the college level. Something that isn't coming up at all, though, is interesting is Dak Prescott. Like, he is going to be such an important piece to whatever formula, whatever coach's formula, all right, that you're going to bring in. And yet there's been no real talk about, Dak's development and a coach that can take Dak to the next level. And one of the things that intrigued, I think, or at least that should have intrigued Cowboys fans, was the fact that Dak had one of his best years under Mike McCarthy in that Tex Coast offense, whatever it was. You need a coach that can bring out the most in Dak. You need big Dak energy. And you did get that with Mike McCarthy. I know Kellen Moore is also another name that's been mentioned. Kellen Moore and Dak worked together for a long time. I don't know if you got the best of Dak, though. You got Dak to hit closer to his ceiling with Mike McCarthy a couple of years ago. Obviously now he's older, overpaid, if you want to say that, but also dealing with injuries. So I get that, but that should be one of your number one objectives. Like, I need somebody who's going to come in and, like I said, make sure I can get the big Dak energy, because otherwise the Cowboys got no shot of advancing past the divisional round. And Cowboys fans, I know how Cowboys fans feel about Dak. The big issue with Dak and Cowboys fans is Cowboys fans never warmed up to Dak. There's a great Chris Rock line. He's talking about marriage and relationships, and he's talking about why your woman's always mad. Like, why is your woman always mad and angry? If your woman's mad and angry, I'm not saying she is, but if she is mad and angry all the time, why is she in a bad mood? And his answer is because you are not her first choice. And that encapsulates how Cowboys fans feel about Dak. Dak wasn't their first choice. Neither was Romo. Why all those guys will always be very, very polarizing is because they always wanted a prince that was promised, a really high draft pick at quarterback. And the Cowboys haven't done that. They don't really do that. They've drafted the fewest quarterbacks in the NFL since 2000. They don't really operate that way. And that's a lot of what the Dak blowback is about. But different discussion for a different day. But the Cowboys do need to be concerned about the next coach maximizing Dak and bringing that big Dak energy that I discussed. All right, we come back. We'll get into more playoff discussion. We'll talk about the Texans a little bit. We talked a lot about the Cowboys. Let's talk about the Texans a little bit, and we'll get into more Cowboys discussion as the show goes on. All of that and more right here on The Zone, the Craig Way Show. I'm Lifetime Longhorn. Right, it's coming back right here on AM 1300. Babers. Let's talk some Texans a little bit, even though we talked a lot of Cowboys, of course. I'd like to give the Texans, who actually are still in the playoffs, give them a little airtime, even though the Cowboys do dominate. The Cowboys always believe in be good or be interesting. It helps to be both, but if you can't be good, just be interesting. Cowboys definitely are more interesting than the Texans, but the Texans are pretty damn good. They'll have to show how good they are. They'll be facing the Kansas City Chiefs and hoping to topple a dynasty right now, hoping to win 3 in a row and would do something that no other NFL team has ever done. But let's talk about the Texans a little bit. It's something that, I'm not saying the Texans are going to pull the upset. I'm not predicting that. I'm taking Kansas City. I'll just say that right now. But in looking at the ways that the Texans can beat Kansas City, because I do believe it's going to be close, but the Kansas City Chiefs have played close games all year. I believe they had like 7 walk-off wins this year. They've been playing close games all year. That's what they do. They're not good, but they are clutch. But the Texans defense has made some of the best quarterbacks in the NFL look pedestrian. I'll give him that. DeMeco Ryans does a good job of coming up with game plans. He's really modernized that defense. Right? That defense is as modern as it gets. You got elite, versatile edge rushers. You're the only team with 2 players ranked in the top 10 in sacks, Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. And so you can just straight up get after the opposing passer, and you can create organic pressure with just those 2, or you can decide to blitz. Texans don't blitz a ton, but they will to break tendency. But the Texans secondary is what's really surprised. We knew they were going to be able to apply pressure just because of what they did in the offseason. But the secondary was still a question, concern. Actually, even early on in the season, the secondary is really rounded into form. And remember what they did to Jared Goff? He threw 5 interceptions. Remember Josh Allen? Remember Josh Allen when he played the Texans? He had I believe it was he had 30% completion percentage. It was his career low, and it was the lowest completion rate in a game for any quarterback with at least 30 passes in the last 30 years. I mean, I had never seen, at least in the last 4 or 5 years since we have put Josh Allen on this pedestal, I've not seen him play that bad like he played against the Texans. Jared Goff and Detroit Lions ended up winning that game. I don't know how the hell you win a game when your quarterback throws that many interceptions, but they did. Jordan Love threw a couple of picks versus the Texans too. Tua, I think Tua's a good quarterback, threw 3 picks in a game. My point is they've made some good quarterbacks, and of course Justin Herbert recently Justin Herbert threw multiple interceptions, pick 6s in that game. So the Texans secondary actually is easily the biggest surprise of the season. That group is playing really, really well. Kalen Bullock, nobody saw that coming. In the secondary, you had starters that were down in the secondary. And yet, Derek Stingley had one of his best games. I predicted before the season started he would be an all-pro. I don't know if he's playing well enough to be an all-pro, but he's definitely having a hell of a year. Kamari Lassiter, Eric Murray. I mean, your backups and even some of the younger guys are playing really well for the Texans. If you look at what's his name? I saw the young man, Miles Bryant is his name. He led the team. Miles Bryant, who's, nobody thought he'd be a guy that's playing a lot for him, but because of the injuries, he played a lot. He ended up on Ladd McConkey. He led the team in covering Ladd McConkey. He was on him 44% of the time. Now, Ladd McConkey ended up having a good game versus the Texans. But the Texans are not afraid to play some of those young guys. And so we'll see if the secondary will be tested going up against the Kansas City Chiefs, of course. But that's a good sign. They also are going to need that running game. And I would say that they, with the injuries at wide receiver, losing obviously Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell, getting back Nico Collins, they've been running a lot of 2 tight end sets, and they did against the Chargers. And I didn't say they played bully ball, but they were able to move the football pretty easily versus the Chargers with those 2 tight end sets, and not force some man coverage on the outside. Once they got the run game going, averaged almost 7 yards per play out of 12 personnel. 60% success rate out of 12 personnel. That's something to watch too. And that would, for the Texans who, now you don't have your full complement of weapons at wide receiver. that would force some teams to play you either out of 40 personnel at times, or it would allow you to kind of isolate Nico Collins on some matchups if you like them. If they don't, then you can win the numbers advantage inside, and they do have some good tight ends. So that's for the Texans. I mean, that's two of the things that they showed versus the Chargers that I really like. Love the way the secondary is playing. I think Will Anderson had 2 sacks in that game. Daniil Hunter had 5 pressures in that game. I think they accounted for 11 pressures, just the two of those guys. That was, to me, something that gives them hope that maybe they can make things interesting versus the Chiefs. And the way the secondary is playing, Derek Stingley. I mean, he was targeted 10 times in that game versus the Chargers. He only allowed 5 receptions for 30 yards. He had 2 picks. He had a PBU. And I think he had 30 passer rating when he was targeted. He's playing like a shutdown corner. You're going to need that because you're going to need multiple players to help you neutralize Kelsey. And then you need to be able to trust your guys to hold up one-on-one on the outside. And that's a tall task when Patrick Mahomes is the starting quarterback. So we'll talk more about it and break it down, but that's something the Texans, when they played good quarterbacks, and Patrick Mahomes, they played him too, and they did not fare so well versus Patrick Mahomes. We'll see if they got a better game plan this time around. DeMeco Ryans has done a good job previously coming up with good game plans for the Texans and their secondary versus elite quarterback personnel. But I'll say this about the Texans. They still, in my opinion, are ahead of schedule. I mean, CJ Stroud last year, you won a playoff game, won the playoff game this year. CJ Stroud and DeMeco Ryans. So this year isn't the year that I would, if I'm a Texans fan, feel disappointed that they can't topple the Chiefs. Next year would be the year that if they can't get it done next year, then you start feeling some, if you're a Texans fan, maybe start feeling some disappointment there, but they're way ahead of schedule. CJ Stroud, second-year quarterback, and the offensive line should be better. That's something you got to work out over the offseason, but the defense is ahead of schedule, in my opinion, too. You got a top 6 pass defense this past season. Your rush defense is above average, but I believe next year you can end up with a top 5 pass defense, a borderline top 5 rush defense too, potentially, and then your defense will probably lead the way. And then CJ Stroud won't have to have so many save us CJ moments, and you can play a complementary style of football with your defense leading the way and a balanced running attack. And then Nico Collins is your guy. You should have more weapons on the outside too. They're probably have to draft him. And Tank Dell, now multiple seasons with injuries. You're about to draft some more wide receivers for CJ Stroud, but like I said, you'll have first world problems to deal with this offseason. But it ain't starting yet. You still got to play the Chiefs. Just a Herculean task to take down that monster. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about some Texas football coming up on the other side. And we'll dive into what the Texas roster is going to look like for 2025 and all the departures on the 40 acres for the Longhorns. All that and more right here on the broadcast. Right here on the Craig Way Show on AM 1300.
So, your home for the Horns. Right, open.
Welcome back to the Craig Way Show here on AM 1300 The Zone. I'm Lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. I appreciate Craig letting me sit in for him while he is on the road. Let's talk some Texas football. Lately, we have seen a ton of guys who have either announced that they are declaring early for the NFL draft, or guys who are basically putting out messages, even though their eligibility is exhausted, putting out messages, farewell messages, if you will, saying goodbye and announcing they're going to the NFL draft, even though, they don't really have a choice. So they're going to be eligible for the NFL draft anyway, because they've exhausted their eligibility. But now it's a thing where everybody makes a statement. So just talking about departures, period. That includes guys who are declaring early and those who are out of eligibility. Just kind of going through the list here of some of the ones lately. Cam Williams being one of the latest. He's declared for the NFL draft. So he's leaving. You also have Mo Blackwell. He's gone because of eligibility. Gunnar Helm too. Isaiah Bond declared early. So Isaiah Bond, he's decided that he is foregoing any eligibility. Quinn Ewers, of course, that was announced even before the bowl game. Kelvin Banks, he's probably going to be a top 10 pick. And Hayden Connor, that was also the case. I think he might be out of eligibility. Jaden Blue, he declared early. Jaden Blue, after a 14 touchdown season. Matthew Golden, another player declaring early for the NFL draft. Gavin Holmes, Andrew Makuba, Vernon Broughton, also among the players that's also declaring for the NFL draft. So it is a long list of players that Texas will be losing. And it's growing every day. There's still some other guys who haven't necessarily made the announcement. Michael Taft is still out there. Trey Moore is another guy that hasn't really been announced what he's going to do. So there's still some other guys, I think, that we are waiting on their declarations or announcements. But for the most part, Texas was expected to lose a lot of guys, and they're expected to have double-digit guys drafted. Now, last year was 11. Some say at least 11 will be drafted this year. And among those guys that we just mentioned, Kelvin Banks, Cam Williams. So you're losing what some people are saying is the best tackle, or among the best tackle duos in college football, in Kelvin Banks and Cam Williams. Those guys are expected to be, Kelvin Banks is a top 10 pick. Cam Williams expected to be a top 40 pick in the NFL draft. Who knows how he tests? It could end up being higher than that. Didn't have a great end to the season, but he was also dealing with an injury there. But yeah, now relating to the Texas roster for 2025, your offensive line is probably going to be hit hardest out of all of these departures of any position, because you're going to lose your two tackles. You lose your starting center, Jake Majors, who started more games than any other player in Texas football history. You lose Hayden Connor on that offensive line too. You're just losing a lot of talent, a lot of depth on that offensive line overall. So that's the group, I think, even though you've been stockpiling a ton of talent. You got Trevor Gooseby coming back. He's going to be great. Brandon Baker is going to be another really good player for you. Still a lot of inexperience, unproven commodities on the O-line. So I think O-line and then wide receiver, because you're losing Matthew Golden. You're losing Isaiah Bond. Isaiah Bond was still mentioned, but Matthew Golden, right now, Daniel Jeremiah. I read this tweet earlier, and I was a little surprised by it, but maybe I shouldn't be, because Matthew Golden has been spectacular in the last couple of games. Jeremiah's tweet 5 hours ago: just finished studying Texas wide receiver Matthew Golden. He could easily be the top receiver in this draft class. He said easily be the top receiver in the draft class. And I will say that there's nothing that there's no question I needed answered that he didn't answer late in the season. I was worried about, I don't know if he could be a true deep threat. Became a deep threat for the Longhorns. I was worried about whether a guy of his stature could make contested catches. Made contested catches. I was worried about whether a guy of his size can go up and make catches and high point the football and go up over a defender and do it. Did that too. He was a great red zone target, ran precision routes, was able to take on the role as the number one wide receiver when you needed him to. Great body control. Played inside, played in the slot, played outside. Yeah, now the number one wide receiver in this class. That's a different discussion, but that's what I trust Darren Jeremiah. He's saying that he's got that type of potential, and that's why he's leaving. But also, that's what kind of hole you're going to have in your wide receiving core, losing Matthew Golden, losing Isaiah Bond. You've lost a lot there, and we'll see. They got a lot of talent at wide receiver with the class they're bringing in, and they got some guys already on campus. Livingstone is another guy I think people really like. You'll have more, DeAndre Moore. You'll have Ryan Wingo, but I think O-line, D tackle, and wide receiver. If you're looking at the departures overall, I think those are the ones. And you know what? I mean, tight end, I guess, is in that conversation too. You don't really know who your tight end's going to be. Got Amari, I don't know, Amari Niblack's status, that kind of thing. I know you got Jordan Washington, who they really like as a youngster, but they're unproven. So those may be the 4 positions. And remember, Sark says behind quarterback, tight end is the second most important position in his offense. And Gunnar Helm had statistically one of the greatest seasons we've ever seen for a tight end at Texas. So just looking at it, I guess those are the positions that concern me the most looking at the departures. But you've been stockpiling. Texas has been stockpiling talent for a long time. So the talent is there. It's just unproven. And we know this group can develop talent. But I thought some of these guys would return. Like the Gavin Holmes one is a little surprising because I thought Gavin Holmes returned, had a great year, but thought he could contend to be a starting corner potentially for Texas this year. On the other side of Malik Muhammad, thought that was the case. He's leaving. I thought Cam Williams is another guy. Honestly, I thought Cam Williams. And I know he's a top 40 pick. I believe he's got good money out there for him. But ultimately, he had 15 penalties, I believe, this year. If I'm not mistaken, I think he led college football in penalties. And he'll get developed at the NFL level. I mean, they know how to do that. But yeah, he definitely could have matured and developed into being a top 15 pick. But yeah, limited experience. Did have a lot of penalties. Gave up those 2 sacks in the Ohio State game. Not saying the guy doesn't have first round ability. Of course he does. But I think he could have got close to reaching it. But these days, hey, man, go get paid. Go get paid for them reps. That's what the guys are doing. So Longhorns are losing a lot, but that means a lot's got to step up. We'll talk about that tomorrow, actually, because I'll be back tomorrow. I'll be back for Craig Way and for Cam Parker. Appreciate both of those guys letting me sit in. Thanks to Ronald behind the scenes, tweaking the dials. Appreciate all you guys for joining us and for listening. And tomorrow we'll be back, same time, same channel, the Craig Way Show here on AM 1300 Zone. We'll be back tomorrow. Thank you guys. Peace and hook 'em.